to the Advocast Toolbox, our nice short little podcast episodes that help take the episode from the month and provide some practical framing for how you can start to use those tools right now. So in this month's episode, January 2026, we spent time talking to Lauren Zelt about how to communicate when you're doing outreach, awareness, and advocacy. And we touched on kind of why some messages get repeated and others don't. And one of the biggest differences really comes down to something pretty simple. It's about how you can talk about your work in real time without sounding rehearsed, without rambling. That's my problem. And so that's where today's toolbox comes in. So we're going to borrow a strategy straight from PR and media professionals. Those are the people whose job is to actually communicate clearly under pressure, or to prepare, let's say, a CEO or an executive director to communicate under pressure. And we're going to show how adult education advocates can use that same approach in meetings with policymakers, conversations with funders, and maybe even those unexpected moments when you're put on the spot. So I really want to emphasize here that it's not about having the perfect words memorized. It's about being prepared in a way that still sounds like you. It sounds authentic. It sounds human. So when people think about the term soundbite, they often think it means a script, something that's stiff, polished, and memorized. But I really want to focus in on what a soundbite is and why I think we in adult ed should start thinking about preparing them. So a soundbite isn't a script, it's a prepared idea. And so when PR professionals are preparing sound bites, they don't memorize the exact wording, nor do they encourage the person they're preparing to memorize exact wording. Instead, they help to develop one clear idea that can be expressed at different lengths depending on that situation. And so that flexibility matters because it removes a lot of the pressure, right? You don't have to feel like you are completely lost if you stumble or flip something around. And that can happen whenever you have something that's memorized. So again, it's not about saying something perfectly. It's about staying grounded in that same idea and not getting off track. So when you know your core message, you can focus on connecting rather than worrying about getting every single word right. Okay, so let's look at a kind of common soundbite model, which is called the 10, 30, 60 soundbite model. And it's a simple way to prepare one idea at 3 different lengths. So step 1, pick one idea only. And I'll be honest, this is the hardest part for me because there are so many things that we do in adult education that I want to shout from the rooftops. And to ask me to choose one is like asking me to choose my favorite child. And to be clear, I don't have a favorite child. But you have to choose one idea. And to be clear, an idea is not your entire program. Because I know what your programs do. They do a lot. That's not going to fit in a 10, 30, 60-second soundbite. It can't even be your funding system. And it certainly can't be everything that adult education does. So this might feel exclusive, like you're excluding certain things that you do, and you are, but because you're focused on one idea. And that's not to say you can't have a soundbite for different ideas so that you can cover the whole realm of what you do within your program. But we're going to start with that one idea. So for example, you could say, adult education changes lives at every stage, not just job readiness. Or maybe you want to focus on funding and you want to say funding adult education strengthens entire communities, not just individual learners, right? One idea, that's it. Step 2, you want to build 3 versions of the same idea. And this is something that that Lauren had mentioned in the Advocast episode in January as well, where she talked about having different ways of phrasing that same idea. This is something that I think our adult ed teachers are going to have no problem with. Okay. A teacher oftentimes, when explaining something to one student, realizes, oh, that worked with Joe, but that doesn't work with Jane. So first, 10 seconds. We're going to work from the shortest amount of time to the longest. So 10 seconds, the headline, right? It's basically like what you would read in a newspaper article. It is the headline, one clear statement, no examples, no backstory. These sound bites are perfect for social media, for interspersing into clips and videos, as like a subtitle on flyers. So for example, adult education helps adults gain the skills they need to support their families and contribute to their communities. Done. Right? It feels short because it is short. Now you're going to work on crafting a 30-second explanation. Here you've got your headline and just enough context to clarify it. So you're adding one short explanation. You don't have time for a story. You can't list things out. So this is how it might sound. Adult education supports adults at every stage of life, from improving literacy to earning credentials. It helps people succeed at work, but it also strengthens families and communities. And then you get to build up to your 60-second sound bite. And we're going to call this where you get to add the proof. So you only have enough time for one proof point. And I know, again, it is difficult because there are so many incredible stories that I want to share. And remember, this isn't about what you can or can't share, but this is specifically about that sound bite, that piece that's going to be taken out of context of the wider awareness of adult education, right? That one piece that can flow and live and points people back to why adult ed matters. Okay, so for example, and I know this one's not 60 seconds, I'm not a slow talker. Adult education supports adults at every stage of life. For many learners, it's the first step towards stable employment, better health outcomes, and stronger family engagement. That's why these programs have ripple effects well beyond the classroom. For example, my student Jose was able to learn enough English that he can actually read a story to his children every night in English so that he feels connected to them, not only in Spanish, but also in the language that they are learning in their classrooms. Okay. Now, how do we use this in real situations? Right? You might be thinking, I'm not like walking around down the street and having people put a microphone up to my face saying, hey, what do you think about adult education? So how does this show up in real life? Well, we could have a scenario of a meeting with a policymaker. Right. You could start with the 10-second version, then stop. If they want more, they'll ask, right? And then you can expand. You could also use it when you're having discussions with funders, right? If a funder asks, okay, can you talk about the impact of your work? You can provide your 30-second version. And if they want an example, now you can pull that example from your 60-second version. So, and then let's say maybe you're being put on the spot, right? You are on a panel, walking down the hallway, maybe during a meeting with people that you haven't met yet, and they say, oh, adult ed, like, what is that? And then you can share your, depending on the amount of time, 10-second version. So one of the most powerful PR habits that you can adopt is this: answer the question and then stop talking. something I really struggle with. But in that silence, you allow space for that person to think. You allow them space for them to process and for them to follow up with you on a question where you can see where they'd like the conversation to go. And that's really important in helping to understand where their mind is at. So I want to call out a common mistake. I guess I don't like saying mistake, but I guess that is what it is. And it's switching messages mid-answer. That can come from anxiety, wanting to be thorough. That's my problem. I think if I give you all the information in the world, you'll be able to make sense of it and you'll be like, wow, thank you, Erin. That was really thorough. But really, what it does is completely just boggle the other person's head or slipping into educator mode and turning your answer into a lecture. So you can help identify when you're about to do this, when you start saying something like, oh, and another thing. Not another thing. That's your cue to stop. And when that happens, force yourself to return back to that core idea. Because if it doesn't support that one core idea, that one message, it doesn't belong in that moment. It doesn't mean it doesn't belong in the conversation of adult education. It just means that it doesn't belong in that moment. Okay, so here's something that you can do today. You can do something practical, no worksheet required. But before your next meeting, or if you don't have one scheduled and you just want to prepare and you just want to practice this, envision a meeting with somebody you'd like to meet with, whether it's a funder, again, a legislator, a leader, someone who works within your program. Write down one idea that you want that person to remember, right? Consider your audience when you do this. What point about adult education might be most salient to them? And then craft your 10-second, 30-second, and 60-second version of that and practice them out loud once. Because remember, you don't want to memorize. You want to rehearse it, but you don't want to memorize it. So again, you want to be clear, not complicated. All right. So that's the same principle PR professionals use every day, right? When your message is clear enough to flex it, right, to expand it, to shorten it, and still stay on message, it is more likely to be remembered and repeated. And that's really the key. So I hope that this episode was helpful, and I would actually love to hear your 10, 30, and 60-second sound bites. If you are willing to share them, you can always tag us at COABE, #Advocast, and I'd love to see all of the different ways that we can share the message of adult education. This is Erin Vobornik. Thank you so much for joining me on this Advocast Toolbox.